The Endurance Asia podcast.
And always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining cause things ain't that bad.
Thaddeus Lawrence, welcome to the Endurance Asia podcast.
Thank you very much, Scott, and being welcome to your home as well.
Yes, it's very good to have you over. You are actually sort of one of the, I suppose, big influencers for me actually getting this podcast started. I don't know if you remember us meeting in my office. We met every sort of 3 to 6 months, and actually I was telling you about I wanted to do this, and you gave me some great ideas for it, gave me a list of people I should speak to, and it's kind of about 2 years later that I've actually pulled my finger up.
I know, we talked about it for quite a while. Quite a while, right? And then it was on the last time that I was in the office about 6 months ago, and I'm like, okay, Scott, we're going to do this, or you're not going to do this.
Absolutely, like, stop fucking about. If you're going to do it, like, give yourself a time frame. And then you actually, from that point, I like went online and bought all the equipment. I like made appointments to sort stuff out, and then you were like, you have to put a deadline on it, because otherwise you're just always going to talk about it and never actually get it done. And then you did give me a deadline of the end of the year, or I gave myself it, and didn't quite meet it, but still it got my arse in gear. So.
Yeah, it was kick butt time, right? It was okay, great. You know, we're gonna get done. Okay, I think you were traveling somewhere, and you say you're gonna look up some equipment, and we say, okay, great. You know, so what equipment you look at, by when you're gonna be purchasing equipment. And I remember telling you the story about how I got my book written as well, because I had talked about writing a book. So this is back in so 2009 so after I did the Sahara race, right? That was in the second half of 2009, and I told myself, hey, great, what a great experience. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to get this book out by Christmas 2009. And then Christmas 2009 came, and Christmas 2009 went, and there was no book. And I convinced myself, I said, well, hey, look, you've only done one race. Why didn't you do the next race first so you can gather more material? There's a lot more content, right? And the early 2010, I was going to do the Gobi. And so I told myself, okay, great. So middle year 2010, I'm going to get the book out. And middle year 2010 came, and it went, and there was no book. And of course, I had a justification, an excuse for it. I said, okay, that's because you're going to be doing Antarctica at the end of this year. And oh my gosh, you're going to write a book, you've got to have Antarctica in there. So we'll get the book out for Christmas 2010. And so Antarctica came and went, Christmas 2010 came and went, and there was still no book. And once again, the justification, I convinced myself that, I was going to do the 4 deserts. So how can you write a book based on the completion of only 3 deserts? Right? You've got to get the 4th desert. And so, of course, the timeline was reset. It was going to be middle 2011. I would get the book out. And, of course, it came and it went. There was still no book. And finally, I sat myself down and said, look, listen, are you going to write a book or you're not going to write a book? Right? If you're going to write a book, get it done already. And if you're not going to write one, that's okay too, but stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because one thing I find is that, we make these agreements with ourselves, right? To set a plan or a timeline or wanting to do something is an agreement with ourselves. And every time we break an agreement with ourselves, we know it. And it hurts us. Right? It actually chips away a little bit of our self-concept or our self-image. And so I had the agreement then. I'd say, look, listen. That's it. Christmas 2011. If no book comes out at Christmas 2011, you're never gonna talk about a book anymore. And you know what the beautiful thing was? I set aside time. I remember this was over August, that year. And 90% of the book was written over a 10-week period. Right? And 2011 Christmas, there was a book that came out. I remember I was sharing this with you in your office 6 months ago, and I said, look, listen, so are you going to do this podcast or not going to do this podcast? If you're going to do it, get it done. If not, let's not talk about this anymore, right? We've been talking about it for like 2 years or thereabouts.
Yeah, it's amazing how you, when you talk about something, it's a bit like, there's a guy called Derek Sivers, and I'm not sure if I used this analogy when we were discussing before. He was like a tech entrepreneur, But really, really impressive guy. And he has this concept around not voicing your goals.
Mm-hmm.
So
he did a TED talk on that, didn't he?
He did a TED talk on it, yeah. And it's like a reverse psychology. And the way he looks at it, if you say to someone, hey, I'm going to run a marathon, and then you get that kind of dopamine effect of actually feeling like you've achieved something just by someone saying, great, good on you, yeah, you're going to do a marathon. And then that doesn't actually set everything you need to do to achieve it. It just gives you that sense of achievement without having done anything. So saying you're going to train for a marathon may be slightly different, but his concept is don't voice your goals, keep them internally, and then you'll hold yourself more accountable to them. There's two trails of thought. You know, there's other thing like if you do voice them, other people will hold you accountable, which in this case you've done. But it's an interesting way to sort of to look at goal setting. And actually, one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on the podcast, partly because you're an inspiration for me starting it, but also because I think there's a real great correlation between being an endurance athlete or being interested in being good at it and being good at within your professional career. And you've been a successful endurance athlete completing the 4 deserts, and we'll get into that, but then you're also one of the top business coaches in Singapore and across the region. So I'm really interested to sort of to dig into that, and actually on that I'm interested in how, when you're coaching people, you think about coaching around goal setting and how you make people accountable and make across their entire careers, not just with one specific project they're working on.
Yeah, because ultra endurance racing, I use it as a metaphor for life. Right, our life is one long ultra endurance race, right? And the principles and the processes for success in an ultra endurance race, a physical ultra endurance race, are the same kind of processes or mental processes we go through, and the same kind of principles that we apply to success in life/work/business. And so it's a very fitting metaphor, I find, because just like in a physical race, the race of life, every day we need to get up and do it all over again. Every day, week, month, or year, we're expected to get stronger and stronger. And as the days and years wear on, we're expected to get closer to a finishing line, right, that we're set. But the only problem is that a lot of people are going through lives, they wake up and they don't necessarily want to do it all over again. Right? We call it the Monday blues, we call it midlife crisis, we call it a whatever, but we just don't want to get up and we don't want to do it all over again. And people do go through their lives not necessarily getting stronger and stronger, and they're certainly not necessarily getting closer to the finishing line. A lot of people don't even know what the finishing line looks like, right? They don't necessarily know what they want in life, or they don't even know what, that success that they are working towards and what that looks like. So, it's the same way that you get up, in the middle of the desert in a race, kind of going, oh God, seriously, like, why? Why did I do this? And, where's the finishing line going to be today? And what's going to take me there? So I love using it, especially certainly when I'm giving my keynote speeches in conferences or events, and whether it be sales teams or to leadership teams, it's a very powerful metaphor that everyone can relate with, whether they run or they do not run.
It's interesting you say that, because I've just finished reading a book, Great by Choice, by Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. Mm-hmm. Have you read Good to Great?
I've Good to Great, but not Great by Choice.
So Great by Choice is actually his 4th book. So he's got Good to Great and Built to Last, and there's another one, and then Great by Choice. But interestingly, so what it looks at is 2 comparison companies and one that's grown 10x of the other based upon the same environment, same industry. An example, so there's 7 companies and then 7 comparisons, and it has like Microsoft, and then Apple is the comparison Microsoft does 10x of Apple. And the year is from 70 to 2002. Fascinating book, really. It's just as good to great. There's some really great parts of it. But in that book, there is around 3 or 4 times that he he relates certain business situations to an endurance athlete or mountaineer. One of them being Amundsen, who's the first guy to get to Antarctica.
Antarctica, yeah,
and
Norwegian. Right?
Like
Yeah.
everyone thinks of Scott of the Antarctica, but actually he was the one that didn't make it back. Obviously, made it to the South Pole after Amundsen, but then didn't survive. And it just talked around the sort of planning and how. And the sort of dedication around it, but it used one of the analogies that it has in the book is it talks about the 20-mile march or something it calls, but essentially every day, regardless of the conditions, they would do 17 miles to 20 miles every day, regardless of the conditions. If the conditions were amazing, they wouldn't go, okay, we'll do 30 miles today. They would like every day, keeping that consistent movement every day meant that they could they could keep on planning forward, wouldn't push themselves too hard in good times, or wouldn't just hunker down when the weather was bad. They would still push on through regardless. And it uses that, and that correlates across these 7 companies, which outperformed their competitors by 10x. Correlates very so. An example being, when the market is great. I use Southwest Airlines as an example. The markets were great. And they were getting invited to open up new cities all around the US. But they were based in Texas. They were like, we're just going to focus on our core, stick to what we know, and won't expand too quickly. Whereas their competitors all were like, right, okay, let's open up all these new routes. And then as soon as like deregulation hit, or whether or 9/11, whatever it was, they were immediately had to like close down flights, close down routes. Whereas Southwest Airlines didn't have 1 year of non-profitability in the sort of 25 years, which in an erratic industry like the airline industry is a perfect example. And they used this sort of like 20-mile march of just continuing doing the same thing every day.
And you use the word there, consistency,
right,
of that, right? Regardless, come rain or shine or snow, you're churning out the 20-mile march every single day.
And Amundsen, it talked about there was only 5 days out of the 40 or something where they were truly snowed in, but every day, even in bad weather, they dragged themselves through. And then there's another analogy in the book where it talks about, sorry to get deep, I've literally just finished the book. So I'm like, where it talks about David Breschers, who was an amazing mountaineer. He was on Everest in '96 when there was the huge catastrophe into thin air John Krakauer wrote about. And it talked about they were actually on the way to the summit, and then they saw that he just had a bad feeling about it. And he saw loads of people up on the mountain and was just like, they're obviously filming the IMAX Everest movie, and they just thought, if they get stuck in a traffic jam or anything, there's just too much risk around it. So they decided to come down. And then people are seeing him on the way up, like, why are you coming down? The conditions are perfect. And then he was just, something doesn't feel right. And it talks about productive paranoia.
Productive paranoia.
Yeah, so like he was just, things didn't feel right. He was a bit worried about stuff, so they decided to retreat. And obviously everyone knows the story of, 9 people pass away, and there's a massive rescue, and 2 of the top guides and mountaineers passed away in the Hall and Fisher. And so, and my point being is it's just fascinating the way that there's so many correlations between businesses or running business and endurance sports and mountaineering, etc.
Yeah, and this thing that you brought on consistency, and I'm finding it in the way that my own business grows, and I'm seeing it in some of the people whom I'm coaching. Is so last year I climbed a couple of mountains in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and at the end of those climbs we were back in camp and awaiting our trip back to the city and then on to home. And one of our guides was, he had his little boy, his son there in the camp, and he was teaching him archery, which is one of the national sports in Kazakhstan. And I was watching them, and I thought, I fancy a crack at this as well. And I went to, I said, hey, could you teach me how to, shoot as well? Archery, and then okay, so he taught me the basics of it and how it works and everything else. And then he retreated to a few paces behind, sat in the shade and drinking his whatever cool lemonade. And I was just sitting there practicing. And once every so often, and I would hear behind me, he'd go, "Oh, Thad, oh, good job. Oh, great shot. Oh, well done. And after a while, I thought, mate, are you taking the piss? Right? Because so imagine you've got this big board, right? Target board. And then on the target board is this A4 sheet of paper with, all the rings that's drawn on this A4 sheet of paper. And all my arrows were missing not just the target, they were missing the sheet of paper. And some of them were they were all in a far corner of the board, right? And I was like, what's up with him going, it's a great shot and well done? So I turned around and said, mate, come on, you're having a laugh, right? What's this with great shot? I said, I'm not even hitting the piece of paper, never mind the target, never mind bullseye. And he got up and he said, whoa, hang on. He said, you got to understand something. Okay, watch this. He said, look, yes, it's true that you're missing the bullseye and the target, but notice all your arrows are landing in this general area of the board. And he says, that's a good thing. And in fact, that's a very hard thing to do. He says, because you could hit bullseye now, but then with your very next arrow, if you miss the board, that was luck, that was fluke. You didn't know what you were doing. But everything, you have this consistency of all your arrows landing. And he says, we've got a saying here in Kazakhstan when it comes to archery. It says, if you're consistent the way that you are, the target will appear. Right now, part of me believed him. There was part of me that still wanted to engineer a few bullseyes, right? But what I discovered was that each time I overthought it, or each time the more I tried to engineer it, my shots got even worse. Right, the arrow would miss the board completely, or the arrow would just fall from my hand, onto the ground in front of me. But it was the moments where I just, got into this flow of just aim, that's what happened. And I'm seeing that with, some of the people who I'm coaching now who want to make a transition, from being in a full-time job to, say, becoming a full-time coach. And initially, there's been this kind of, I'm not getting the clients, I'm not getting better at what I do. And I'm just exhausted. I'm just hanging there, right? Be congruent in terms of who you are as a person, right? Because this is, I take the field of self-development very seriously, in the sense that, we cannot be in a business of self-development if we're not developing ourselves. Right? And I say,
practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach. And in fact, you only get to preach what you're already practicing. Right? So, you got to hang in there in terms of the values in which you hold yourself. You got to be consistent in terms of your practice, and the target will appear. And it's hard to believe that in the beginning, right? Because you're not seeing the visible results. But then when the results come, maybe you can go like, wow, how did that happen? Well, that's exactly it. Right, consistency, 20 miles every day, you get to the pole.
Yeah. There's actually, hearing you talk about that, there's another really great analogy in the book, and it talks about, actually, the most successful companies aren't necessarily the most innovative, because you hear the saying like innovate or die is. And actually, they found that of the 7 cases, I think only 2 of them were more innovative than their comparison companies who were least successful. And this analogy is going to stick with me forever. And he talks about the using the bullets than cannonballs. Have you ever heard this analogy before?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it uses the analogy like, okay, you're in a ship at a war with another ship, and then you're limited to your last bit of gunpowder. And so rather than just put all the gunpowder and fire that cannonball and hope to sink it, you actually use a little bit of the gunpowder, use a gun, shoot a bullet, and then, okay, you work out, okay, we missed the boat, but you recalibrate it, and then you've missed again. Third shot, bang, you hit the ship, you load the rest of the gunpowder into the cannon, boom, you sink it. And so taking this analogy into business, it's about shooting bullets, trialing projects, trialing products, doing pilots, and then when you have enough data or info to know that it's going to work, load everything behind it and go hard. And I'm just hearing you talk about it then with with the bow and arrow and the archery. It can also be kind of the same in your personal career as well. If you want to be a coach, well, carry on doing your normal job, and then maybe just take on 1 or 2 clients. Obviously, do the courses, and then see how it goes and see how they develop. And then, if you know that you've got the skill to do it, then put everything behind it.
Right.
But don't automatically just leave your job. Like, that would be like me leaving my job and just go, right, I'm going to do podcasting for a career. I don't know if I'll make any money, but this is a passion project, right? But you know what? Like, if it does work, and this is like it could be a it could end up being a cannonball for me in future.
There we go, right? This is $1 million conversation in the making.
Yeah, I don't think so. My wife would be like, "No, you're not giving up work." But yeah, that's fascinating. So, interested to get into your backstory as well, in terms of you obviously got to do the 4 deserts, which is one of the toughest sort of endurance series in the world, and you started when you're 37, and what was like the key instigator for you? Because you prior to that point hadn't really been an endurance athlete, so to speak. You wasn't really a trail runner.
I didn't do much running, apart unless you count running for the bus, or running from the odd bully in school. But yeah, wasn't into the outdoors, into adventure, into running or extreme sports by any stretch of imagination all the way through my school life. Although I had been exposed to the Marathon des Sables. That was the first race that came into my consciousness of this world of long distance multi-day ultra endurance racing. And I remember each time I read about it in the Sunday Times magazine or watched it on Discovery Channel, I'd be fascinated. But even though I wasn't gonna kind of put on a pair of shoes and head off to the desert, but I was really fascinated by these people. What got them to do it? Number one, and number two, what keeps them at it? Because it's excruciating. It's not a walk in a park. There's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of suffering. There's a lot of not very pretty things happening to your feet, but they still came back for more. And particularly, I was very fascinated about how I would have responded in that kind of situations, right? Where you have your 17th blister on your foot, and 5 toenails disappearing, and you're walking around with a limp. Would I keep going? And oftentimes we hear about these stories of the triumph of the human spirit and that desire for survival, right? In mountaineering and that book, and I'm still trying to figure out how many hours it is. Is it 136 hours or 127 hours?
I've got the book.
You've got the book.
Yeah, carry on talking.
It's quite a few days anyway, right? Of this chap who got caught in
127 hours.
127 hours. There you go, right? The title of book and also a movie, and being caught between a rock and a hard place, literally. And for our listeners who are not familiar with this guy who went down to the canyons, fell down and had his arm wedged between a rock and a rock wall, and tried everything they could to dislodge himself or to wriggle out, and nothing worked. And finally, out of sheer desperation or desire to live, he took out this old penknife that he had and began the just excruciating process of hacking away at his arm. And this wasn't a hacksaw, this wasn't a sharp knife. It was something that I think like a butter knife, in effect. But he had to hack away and chip away at bone and his sinews and ligaments and tendons, and finally freed himself, right, from his arm and certain death, and survived. And then when I saw that movie and read that book, one of the questions I asked myself was, what would you have done? Would your hunger for life have been so strong that you would have done whatever it took, which is exactly what he did whatever he took for him to survive. And but it's one of those questions you ask where it's impossible to answer, right? You can theorize, you can make it hypothetical and analyze, but as Mike Tyson, the former boxer, had famous quote. He said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face."
Yeah, that's a brilliant quote, isn't it?
Right. But I wasn't gonna.
Did you read that book then?
I
forget
read
when
the
this
book.
was. This was one of your inspirations.
Yeah, I read that book and then watched the movie. But the book I felt was better than the movie.
Yeah. I interestingly had a similar experience reading "Touching the Void," the Joe Simpson book about climbing the Peruvian Alps and him shattering his lower leg going up through the knee socket into his femur, and his friend obviously lowering him down and him hanging over a precipice and having to cut the rope. He falls deep into a crevasse. Everyone knows the story, but and then his friend climbing down and seeing the crevasse and going, "There's no way he survived that." But him having to lower himself down further into the crevasse, into the deep abyss, not knowing what was down there. These crevasses can go down to the bottom, to the centre of the earth, near enough, and he and then climbing out in excruciating pain. And I had a similar thing, like, what would I have done in that situation? And yeah, you never really know. And I think for me, it was a bit that I read that back in 2003 and was definitely a nucleus for me about being passionate about mountaineering, about endurance sports in general, and finding out where my limits are. I hope never to be in that exact situation, or Aron Ralston's situation in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, we could simulate it, right, by engaging in a race, an adventure race, or a triathlon, or and kind of put ourselves into a testing environment. But I don't think we want to be kind of literally, in a crevasse or stuck in a canyon all on our own just to answer that question. I think I'm not that curious.
Yeah. So you signed up to the
Sahara race.
So the Sahara was the first one, and what was the major sort of like instigator for you to sign up?
Yeah, so the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah, we were talking about me having been exposed to the Marathon des Sables, and I was fascinated by these people, and at the back of the mind there was something in me that said, maybe one day I'd do a race like that, right? But of course, maybe one day has got all the commitment and clarity, right? So that's where it remained, right? Maybe one day I'd do it. And then, back in 2008, I was going to get married. And the short of it was that she called everything off. And, 6 months of kind of grieving and healing and crying like a baby and, a bunch of introspection and reflection. One of the questions I asked myself actually was, in the 3.5 years that we've been together, did I live life to the fullest, right? Or was I, sacrificing my lifestyle for this relationship? And round about that time, again, I think it was a newspaper article of someone who had completed a desert race came in front of me, and I thought, oh, you know what, sort this, maybe rather than one day, I'll do this race, and I'll do it before I turn 40, and I was 36 then. I said, I'll do it before I turn 40. And almost immediately another voice in my head kind of came and go, oh, come on, right? If you're going to do it already. And I thought, yeah, that's true. So I set the goal of the next year in 2009 when I did the Sahara race. So that was that. I wouldn't say it was the reason why or the cause for me to start running, but certainly that breakup was the straw that broke the camel's back. And then one thing led to another, and before you knew it, 4 deserts. Yeah.
And obviously we talked out at the beginning of the conversation about how you wanted to write a book, and you thought after the Sahara, and then almost it's a bit like when you're studying for exams. You put the deadline you want in this book, but say when you an example being when you're studying for an exam and your house is never as clean as when you've got a deadline. It's like you're everywhere's spotless, and you will do everything to put off actually doing the task at hand. So which in a way it can be quite productive, and the fact that it got you to do all the 4 deserts before you got to writing the book, but yeah, it's what sort of was that the main thing that took you from doing did you do the first one and then go, hold on a second, I think I've got it in me to do all of these and check all of these off?
Yeah, I think initially I just wanted to do the one, to experience it, and then it came on the long stage in the Sahara race. You see, all the races, the format's about the same. It's a multi-stage race, and what that means is that for the first 4 days or the first 4 stages, we're running about the equivalent of about a marathon.
Yeah.
Right? After you've done 4 days of that, they have what they call the long day, which is like a double marathon.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, someone's got a sense of humor in terms of how they design
Leave it
the
to
race.
the last day.
Yeah, right. And for most, and then once you're done with that long stage, the final stage is, if you complete the long stage, you're pretty much done.
Home and dry.
Right? You're home and dry, because the final stage is like a very short, 10 kilometers, if you like, or thereabouts to the finishing line. And I remember, and we still laugh about this, myself and Samantha Fanshaw, who's the CEO of Racing the Planet, and she was manning that checkpoint, the overnight checkpoint in a long stage, and I think I was the only one there at that particular point in time. I was laying down. She said, "Look, why don't you just lay down to stretch out and just to rest for a little bit? You're doing good on time, and just to chill a little bit, right? Get some."
Are the cutoffs pretty tough?
They are very generous.
Yeah.
They are very, very generous. I mean,
Yeah.
there are people who miss the cutoff. There are people who pull out. If you're going really, really slow, or typically encumbered by some kind of illness or injury or dehydration or exhaustion.
But generally, you
but
can
generally,
march them home.
You can march them home. You
Yeah.
can. And some people do that. It's almost they don't do any running, but it's just pure power walk, right? The entire thing. And so it's possible, even though I think on typically on a race you have about 15% who miss the cutoff, right? And so I was in a good place at that time on that night, and there I was lying in the middle of Sahara Desert, looking out to millions of skies, and Sam was sitting next to me, and out of nowhere I went, "Sam, when is the Atacama?" And we just burst out laughing, and she goes like, "You know what, Thaddeus, finish the Sahara first."
Get this done first.
And then we'll talk about the next race at the end. But by that time I made up my mind.
Hey.
I knew I was going to be doing.
If you're in like the toughest stage of like a really tough race and you're already thinking about the next race, you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way you're not
There
going
you
to
go.
finish. And then so the Atacama was the next one, was it?
So
It goes.
So how it worked out for me in that calendar was it turned out the Gobi was the next one for me.
Did you do it them all within a calendar year, or
18
you
months.
bridged? Okay,
18 months, yeah.
Because there is a goal to knock them all 4 off.
Yeah, they call it the Grand Slam.
The
right?
Grand
Knock it off
Slam,
in one
but
calendar
because
year.
yours bridged a year, it didn't count.
And I think at that time because I started off in the last race of that year, which was the Sahara race, so it didn't count. So but that was all right.
But you did 4 consecutively.
Yeah,
you did 4. Yeah. So it
kind of ish, right?
yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, I slammed it.
Yeah. I'm actually interested, and part of this podcast is around like suffering and survival, and look, I mean the achievement of you finishing the 4 deserts is amazing. Like it must be one of the proudest moments of your career, which is one thing I want to ask you later. Reading your book, there was one thing I picked up on, and it was actually in the Antarctica one. So the format of that race is
So for the other hot deserts, essentially the format is you have a particular course or distance to run, and it's up to you how long you take, as long as you keep ahead of the cutoff time.
Yeah.
In Antarctica, for a variety of reasons, first of all visitors to Antarctica, whether you're a tourist on a cruise ship or you are a scientist, headed for a research station, or you're a trail runner heading on for a race, you're bound by the Antarctic Treaty. Right? And a big part of our Antarctic Treaty is about wildlife and environment protection. And so to limit our impact on the continent, and also for safety reasons, because there are crevasses, and we're not kitted out, right, in terms of ropes or anything that would help us in a crevasse rescue situation. the course was designed in such a way whereby you're running in loops, and so therefore you're, in this case here in Antarctica, you're given X number of hours in a day, and it's up to you how many loops that you complete during the day, and then then your distance is then accumulated, right, to determine who's run the furthest in that same amount of time to determine the winner. So it wasn't as much fun, I would say, because some of the loops were as small as like 2 kilometers. Yeah. And I don't care how slow you think you go, but if you have 15-hour day, there's a lot of 2-kilometer loops that you can complete in that time, right? You get a bit loopy.
It was a different loop every day, though.
Yeah, it's a different loop every day.
Yeah.
It's a different loop every day. But having a full day just running the same loop was, I had a sense. There was one point I thought, this is what a hamster must feel like, but not really going anywhere.
It's something that I like. Jerry Chu, who you know as well, she's done a lot of races where it's just going around in the same loop, and I always just find it totally tedious. But actually, psychologically, it's good to be able to do a race like that, where if you can go around in circles for that amount of time, if you can go from point to point and that sort of distance.
And for that reason, I don't train on treadmills. I just find it painful.
Same
right?
here.
I'm just on that piece of rubber. I can't handle that. It's
for me, the whole thing is about being in the outdoors. So
yes.
Spending the time indoors on a treadmill.
Yes, and breathing in fresh air rather than air conditioned. Recycled air conditioned air.
Yeah,
huge difference.
Totally with you. But going back to the Antarctica race, there is a big day in the Antarctica one as well, isn't there? There's a penultimate day where you go a lot further. Is there?
Yeah. Well, the Antarctic one. I mean, the year there was quite interesting because every day the race was cut short because there was a blizzard that was blowing in.
Yeah.
Right. So I think a lot of the races in Antarctica don't go according to what was planned, simply because we're subject to the vagaries of the weather, right? Such as the nature of polar desert.
Yeah. Because just reading your book, there was one of the days where you I thought you were sort of lagging behind, going a bit slower, and then the front women there was 3 women that were all in the same way, and on one of the laps round, you sort of like latched onto the back and just like marched on with them and kept the pace with them for the entire rest of the day.
Yeah, I remember that day. Oh my gosh. Look, first of all, I live in Singapore. Right, and when people say, "How did you train for Antarctica?" I said, "Look, I just go to my kitchen, I open up the freezer compartment, I stick my head in there." Right, that's about as closest as I could get to Antarctica, and I have next to nothing type of experience in moving on snow and ice, right? And so going out there on that particular day, the snow and ice. Oh, it's just stunning, this place. I think it just felt like a virgin land that we were entering, and just pristine white and just beautiful, and but it came up to about our knee level, and so it made sense that the best way to move was to follow in the footsteps of the person in front of you, right? Which is exactly what happened. The moment the race kicked off, once the first person had stepped across the start line, every person formed a line right behind. So over the course of the day, the course of the race was formed.
Yeah.
Right? We are all walking in each other's footsteps, and then slowly this narrow trench began to form. And according to race, so the slow ones will get lapped, right? The people in front. And race etiquette demands that when you're about to be lapped, that you step out of that course, that trench, into the snow and ice for them to pass, and then step back in again. And there were times, Scott, where I felt I was doing more stepping out and in than I was actually moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? And for that particular day, 3/4 of it was just up, and then we get to this point that's above the stop-start line, and then it's a steep drop down. Yeah. And then it's up again, and the up is just, oh God, it's one step up, 2 steps backwards, right? Just and I was trying to do it alone, and people were lapping me, and it was just I couldn't catch up with the next slowest person in order to traverse this together. It was just painful, and I just thought, oh my gosh, how long will this go on for? And then at one point, I thought, I've got a brilliant idea. The next people that come around, I'm going to jump back straight in after them and kind of hang on to their coattails as much as I can, right? Use their pace to drive some kind of momentum for myself. And of course, they'll power on ahead, but at least, I've got some kind of traction going on, and that allows me to move and at least establish some kind of consistent pace. And so when I turned around, I saw these three, leading ladies a race, and I'd seen them in previous runs, and they were neck and neck. And I thought, okay, great, this is my chance, right? So I'm gonna wait for them to get by, and I'm gonna jump in, and that's exactly what I did, right? Jumped in, and I just had one goal in mind. I'm just gonna follow them for one loop, just keep up them for one loop, right? And that'll be an achievement. So I got past the start line. I was like, one loop. I thought, oh my gosh, this kind of virtual pat on the back. Well done, well done, well done, right? And then went with them on the second loop and thought, I'm doing well here. And, all I can see is down this trench and that pair of feet in front of me. And the moment that left foot left its place, my left foot would be in there, and the right foot, once it left, my right foot. I'm so close, I'm literally headbutting their backpack, right, behind. And there was one point where I think I got a bit overeager. Like, I went in before their foot take off, and this girl lady in front of me, she came tumbling down she was just cursing and swearing under her breath, like, what's going on here? And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. And all I could think of was, thank God I'm wearing balaclava and goggles. Like, she wouldn't recognize me, right? And I'm helping her up to her feet, and she's cursing and muttering under her breath. I'm like, sorry. But I'm still not going to be falling back, right? I'm keeping up with them. And then I lost track of time, And at one point, we crossed the start line again. I heard a volunteer shout, like, this is your last lap. And I looked up and I thought, what's going on, right? It's blue skies. It's a beautiful day. They can't be cutting short the race again because of a blizzard. Yeah. Right? And I looked at my watch, and, I've been following the ladies nonstop for a good 7 hours. Wow.
And it's interesting. You could have jumped on the back of anyone that had gone past you, but you happened to jump on the female leaders.
Right? And in front of every successful man, there are three women.
Yeah,
was one thing. So we crossed the finishing line, and we were getting hot food, getting our medals, getting hugs. I went up to Sam. Another Sam, right? And she was the lady whom I tripped up, and I'd say, hey, Sam, first of all, this was my best day of racing, like, ever, in all the races, and I want to thank you, right, for letting me kind of hang on to your tailcoats, and you basically helped, pacing me throughout this entire race, and also, hands up, it was me who had tripped you up, right? I'm sorry. But thank you. I had amazing. Thank you. And then Sam turned to me. He goes like, no, Thaddeus, thank you. He said, you don't understand. This too was one of my best days of racing, and I did, exceptionally good time. Thanks to you breathing down my neck and being literally a pain in my ass. I was trying to get away from you, and we had a great laugh, and then we shared that. And it really brought to the fore the nature of competition, because when we look at the meaning of the word compete, it actually means to strive together.
Is that really the... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To strive together.
Yeah.
It's not I win, you lose, or you win, I lose. It's really to strive together.
Yeah.
And that just kind of embodied, the meaning of competition for me, on that day. It was just wonderful and beautiful. And, there's this African proverb, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And that was certainly true for me. And that's what I'm, again, bringing that lesson into life for me. My business, my next stage, my business is to build a team, right? And to do this work together, right? Have people who have a shared mission, who are aligned in terms of our values, and let's go out there and do a lot of good work together.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we were talking before the podcast started just about some of the pivotal moments in your career, and you shared some like really personal stories about when you grow up, your parents split up, and then your mum married an English guy and moved to the UK, and you're brought up by your grandparents. So you saw your mum going to the UK when you were 7, and then your grandmother sort of brought you up, and you sort of worshipped her, and she very unfortunately passed away when she was 13, and then you also talked about your wife as well, or wife to be, and so there was like 3 occasions, and I was hearing you tell me that story beforehand, and I was sort of thinking of the metaphor from that to the 3 women passing you on the Anatata.
Wow.
And then you'd be like, right, I'm not going to let them go.
Wow. Thank you. I never saw it that way. Wow.
And it was just hearing, it made me think of that part in the book. I don't know whether there's anything behind that, but I found that quite interesting. One thing I'm really keen to hear from you is, because when I talk about suffering and survive, I actually really like to talk about DNFs, because I think you learn more from them than you do your successes. And I know you've taken on, obviously on the 4 deserts, but I think was it
the Cordillera? Yeah.
That's like one of the toughest races in the world, right? 328 kilometers.
330 with a total altitude climb of 24,000 meters. It's the equivalent of, it's like going up Mount Everest and back down again 3 times in 6 days. Right, in terms of its altitude, that was crazy, and that was inspired by Jerry Chua, whom you've got another podcast. Like she's my hero, right? And she did that the year before I went for that race, and that was a race that I had a DNF. And oh my gosh, that was God dear, what was I thinking? It was the toughest. It was an animal. That race, I remember. For it really attracted the creme de la creme I found, of trail running athletes. And, that year that I did it, there were about 600 people at the start line. I remember going the night before. They had a, pasta party come briefing, right? And you collect all your you deposit your gear and you collect whatever it is that you need. And I was looking around that hall and thinking, holy shit, like, what have I gotten myself into? Like these people didn't just wander off, the high street and thought, what, I'm going to knock off a trail run. These are people who are top of their game, like real athletes. And the weather was just poor that year. And I recall doing the pre-race briefing, and it was hosted by these 2 Italian guys. They, one of them spoke a smattering of English, but most of the whole briefing was done in Italian. And it got to this part on the weather conditions, right? And, in true Italian fashion, there's a lot of gesticulating and loud voices. And there was a lot of murmurings that was going around, in the hallway, in the hall as well, because they had, I think half of the slots were Italian runners, and then a huge majority from the rest of Europe. And I was thinking, well, what's going on? What's he saying that's attracting this kind of reaction, right, among the runners? And then the English-speaking guy came on. He says, okay, let me put it across to you. Those of you who didn't understand what he was talking, he says, this is the weather. How can I say this? Okay, the weather for this next few days, it's going to be fucking cold. Whatever that you were thinking of bringing or wearing, on this race, make sure you bring and you wear 2 times, 3 times more. I'm serious. This is the mountains. People die, right? This is the Alps, right? We don't want you to die. So, you got to go and repack, okay? It's going to be fucking cold, right? And I thought, oh, what? Seriously? And so it was back to packing and repacking. And, when we started off that day, the next day, umbrellas were out. Everyone had their wet weather gear out, and it was just raining. It was foggy, and we were standing all packed in Courmayeur, and of course all the inhabitants of the town had come out to send us off. There was music blaring, there was an MC on the mic, and there were cowbells that were ringing. There was a huge din, right? And you get swept up by the sounds and the environment and the significance of, oh my gosh, day 1 we're gonna kick this off. And the moment you get flagged off, you're doing basically a loop around the town, and then you head off into the hills. And the loop around the time is it's like a 5-7 minute loop, and then poof, reality sinks in, right? Bang, you're going uphill, and within an hour going up, I see a fellow Singaporean, right, who was on the side guy, and he was, stuffing bread into his mouth, and I stopped and asked him and said, hey, are you okay? And it's like, fuck, I'm too cold, I'm trying to get food down me to get the blood flowing, I can't feel my fingers. I thought, holy shit.
It's going to be a long couple of days.
It's going to be a long couple of days. And oh my gosh, was it long? I think by the end of the first day, there were close to about 100 people who had pulled out already.
Out of how many starters?
Out of 600.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of the second day, about 150. Yeah. I remember getting into that checkpoint at the end of the first day. I couldn't fathom, I couldn't visualize, I couldn't even figure out what 6 days would look like, feel like. Never mind visualize success. And I just couldn't, my body, everything about me was, I just felt like I've completed the full race. Like, that day one and night had just taken everything out of me. And I just, even mentally, couldn't even fathom, look ahead to what day 3 or 4, never mind the finishing line, would look like. And then when I walked out that checkpoint that night, I was looking at the weather charts, and the next pass that we're gonna get to at a wind chill of -7. And I thought, hang on, I signed up. This is August. Was it August or September? I was like, this is supposed to be autumn. I knew we were going up to the mountains, but I didn't account for a -7 and a wind chill. Right? And it was mad. And that second leg of it. Look, this was just a brutal race. I was falling, not just tripping over, I was falling flat out onto my face and slipping and landing out on my rucksack on my back. And in that second leg of it, I was kind of middle of nowhere, and my 2 sets of gloves, my fingers had gone from feeling cold to feeling numb to now feeling pain. Right? And that's like an early signs of frostbite. Yeah. I think, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I was on my own. I thought, okay, look, I'm learning my lessons from Antarctica, right? I think I got to find some other runner and kind of get together with them. And I was struggling to catch up with this person who had overtaken me a bit early on, and I could make out her flashlight. And I was like, okay, I got to keep up with her. And at one point, I stopped and thought maybe I should, wait for the other people to catch up and then go with that group. And I looked behind me, I could see, the whole mountain, just this string of headlamps. But the next person was just miles away. I thought, oh no, I can't wait for this person. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try to at least keep this person in front of me in my sight. And as we round this bend, I could see in the distance this light of a mountain hut, and I knew that was going to be some kind of a stop checkpoint. And I told myself, okay, if she goes in there, I will go in there, right? If she powers on, I will power on, because I've got some kind of momentum going on. I don't want to let my muscles get cold. But she approached the light, she went in. I thought, okay, I'm going in as well, and now I'll get myself a bowl of hot soup. And when I went in through the doors, it was walking into like some kind of POW camp or something. The place, this is a small mountain hut, the place was packed to the rafters. There must have been, 60, 70 runners in there. And everyone, Scott, everyone was, there were a couple of benches, they were all full. Everyone was on the floor all the way through to the toilet, right? Just packed shoulder to shoulder, right? Trying to keep warm. And I went in there. When I first went in there, I thought, okay, I'll get in there, get a bowl of hot soup, and then I'll head back out. When I went in there, I saw them. I thought, I ain't going nowhere.
Yeah. If there's that many people camping out, they're doing it for
exactly,
a reason,
right? And a lot of them are locals, and they must know something that I don't know.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to me at that point, there was a suspension in the race because of the weather conditions. Mm. So anyone who, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have been allowed out, of the hut. So, I must have spent about 2 hours there. I think I got in about, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then the first light, I heard a shout outside. And everyone started kitting up, and I thought, okay, I guess we're all heading out then. And first light, I headed out, and the place was white. It snowed in the last couple of hours, and it's white. And
lucky they did call that. Could have been pretty treacherous
that
out
could
there
have been
for
treacherous.
anyone. Yeah.
Totally, because immediately it was up onto this pass, and that took a couple of hours. By the time I got to the top of the pass, coming down on the other side, the sun was up in the sky, but it was icy. People were falling. And when I had gone down on the other side into kind of greener pastures, I saw a helicopter, above me. And I thought, hey, TV crews, put on a smile, like, come on, leg it, brother.
That's it.
Yeah, you got to look good for this. And a helicopter went past me, but I could still hear it. And I thought, it's hovering around for quite a bit. And I looked up at the pass, and they were airlifting someone off the top of the pass. So it was just treacherous, like crazy.
And at what point? So where did you get to after that point?
Day four, and we were at this point where, I was up to my ankles and even my lower calves in water. It was like a swampland, and a mix of swampland and big boulders, like really slippery. And I was in the middle of nowhere, and there was this Italian runner who overtook me, and as he overtook me, we exchanged a few words, and he was like, yeah, I live around here, I come and run around here, and it was like, you got to take care of yourself, it's terrible weather, it's never like that, but don't worry, when we get to the top here, there's going to be a checkpoint, right, and you can rest in there and can get something warm. And I'm like, okay, great, and then he powered on ahead. And then not too long after, I overtook him. And when I overtook him, he was actually standing talking to another runner. All right, and they were engaged in Italian, and there was no way I could join the conversation. I was like, well, I'll just keep going. And then when they were done with that conversation, he came and overtook me again. And I stopped and said, what happened? Who's the other guy? Where did he come from? Where is he? He said, no, he was ahead of us at that checkpoint, and then decided that he was going to call it a day and was heading back. And I said, well, why is he heading back? Number one, he says, well, it's, the conditions are worse up there where we're heading off to. And this guy is deciding, look, he'll live to fight another day. It's not worth his effort. It's not worth his life. And he's going to head back, to where there's a road access and then call it a day. Mm-hmm. And this is where the first thoughts of me, withdrawing, started to take root. And I was thinking, like, these guys are, they are peak performers, and they don't make these decisions lightly, right? Obviously, there's a lot of thought process involved. They know what they're doing. And I'm thinking, should I turn back as well? And I thought, well, you know what? Let me get to that checkpoint. And we got into this container hut.
What distance was that at?
Oh, I think we're about halfway through now.
Okay, yeah, so like 170 or something.
Yeah, about halfway through. And there was a crowd of runners, and there was a mountain guide there addressing them. And when I went in, what he was saying was basically, look, listen, if you guys want to continue on ahead, make sure you're not doing it alone. Go with somebody, okay? After this, it's going to be more dangerous than what you just experienced coming out here. So if you want to turn around, this is the time to turn around. Okay, if you want to move forward, don't move forward alone. Right? People are like, but what's the condition? What's the weather? He says, like, I have no idea, but it will get worse. Right after this. And that's where I thought, you know what?
You made the call.
That's it. I'm going home, right? But I'll get some hot soup first. And I took my foots. I went into inner room, and I came across these two Malaysians, right? And they're like, hey, brother, you reach already? Come, makan, which is to eat, right? And then we continue. And I'm like, no, guys, I'm done. They're like, no, you cannot give up. Come. We go together. Boleh. Right? The battle cry of Malaysia boleh, right?
Boleh,
right? And I'm like, no, guys. They're like, no, come. We go together. I was like, oh my God, seriously, guys. And then I got swept up, right, by their euphoria. I was like, okay, fine, we'll go on a little bit more. And so we went off, and again, I had a couple more close calls, like really, really steep falls and slips. And that next checkpoint, right, we needed to be in and out of that checkpoint by 3:00. And we got to this, kind of intermediate point. I looked at my watch, and it was 1:30. All right, and
they're pretty strict cutoffs as well.
These ones here are very strict. Once if you're not out, that's it. You're out. Right, so they are there's very little room for maneuver. So they weren't even adjusted, even though the conditions were more treacherous. Right, so I guess that preserves the integrity of that race. So we had about 2 more kilometers to go by our estimation to that checkpoint, and it was had about an hour and a half. You could do that easily, no problem, right? But then not long after that, I realized that I was slowing down. I was falling a lot more. I was feeling more tight. The pains were a lot more. Well, I felt the pains a lot more, and I stopped. I checked in on myself. I was like, what's going on here, right? You can knock out 2 kilometers in an hour and a half. You would make the cutoff easy. And that's when I realized that, the body was able, but the spirit was no longer willing.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes it's the other way
Yeah,
around, right?
yeah.
And that's where I knew I'm done.
Yeah.
That's when I'm done. And it took me in the rest of the hour and a half to come to terms and to make peace with my decision. And so when I went in to that checkpoint and saw the guys, it was only about 2:45 thereabouts. I'm like, that's it, guns. I'm done.
And interestingly, so it took you an hour to make peace of it. Like, did you fully make peace of it there and then?
Do you know what? So after I was done, I called it a day, and then they closed the checkpoint, right? Because no more runners were coming in, and I fell asleep, and I was I had a glimpse into good old Italian kind of family, hospitality, because all the volunteers came in and they cooked up this pasta storm, and they had red wine and everything else, and so they transported me back down to, I think, one of the lower checkpoints, and then from there back into town. And I guess it was a few more hours before I got back into town, and I checked back into my hotel, and then I turned on my phone for the first time, and I got a WhatsApp message from my mum, right, who was in the UK, and it was one of those mum to son type of messages. I love you, I'm very proud of you type messages.
She would have been dot watching the whole way as well, right?
Well, yeah, she would have done, but she wouldn't have known that I had. So I messaged her. I said, "How do you know, Mum?" And she goes, "Know what?" I said, "Know that I had withdrawn." She goes, "No, I didn't know that." I said, "Oh, well, what made you send me?" She goes, "I don't know. I came into work. I just thought of you. I had this feeling, and this urge to send you a message, and that's why I sent you that message." I said, "Well, I've withdrawn. I'm done with the race now." And then her next message just sent me into tears, and she wrote, she said, "Look, knowing you, when you're up against the wall like that, the easier thing for you to have done would have been to meet the cutoff and to continue running, and knowing you would have completed the race. And so for you to have made the decision to withdraw yourself was a lot more difficult and took a lot more courage from you to do that." And I just said that. I just went.
I actually remember you posting about this on Facebook as well. This would have been 2015.
Yeah, I wrote quite a long post on it on Facebook.
Do you? Because actually, that was called a sort of. You haven't done any like major races since then.
Not
have
since
you?
then.
So
yeah.
you must kind of be at peace with it, right?
Yeah, I think that was when I knew I had healed.
Yeah.
From what got me running in the first place.
Yeah.
That whole running away. Yeah. Right. I wasn't running away anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least I wasn't using running as an excuse to run away from what I needed dealing with. And that's when I realized that I'm very much at peace with it. I knew that I had healed, from 6 years ago. Right. And I didn't need to run to do anything. And I mean, I still run for the sake of running, but to go into a race, the next thing for me, I mean, since then I've gone on a mountaineering expedition.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of mountain trekking, but I'm now more drawn into mountaineering or something with a team element. I think that's calling out to me now, and I think the next time I would do. So the mountaineering aspect, when you climb the mountain in Kazakhstan, we all roped up to each other. Yeah. I just love that other people component about it. I mean, trail running is great because of the camaraderie of it. I meet some amazing people. The community is just wonderful. But ultimately, it's an individual pursuit, right? And I just love the whole idea of all in or nothing with a group of people. And I would still love to do another ultra race, but in the team, category.
That's one of the reasons I love adventure racing is because of the team part of it. I also find it when you're doing ultramarathons is quite frustrating because when you're doing just purely an ultramarathon as a team, because you're only as fast as your lowest member, but it can be, unless you are the slowest person in the team, it can be a bit frustrating, and But adventure racing is really an interesting dynamic because you can, as you said, the sort of old fable, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And the great thing about like expedition adventure racing is it is far. It's 500 odd kilometers, and you need to work as a team to do that. But I'm really interested to like go into some sort of, I suppose, quick fire questions for you. First one being, what makes you emotional?
What makes me emotional? People. Something about people that makes me emotional, and what matters, and what matters also brings joy, and also brings hurt and pain. I think that gets me emotional. And I mean, my most recent cries have been on board the plane watching A Star Is Born and Bohemian Rhapsody. Right, and that kind of like tugged at me. Those two movies, and it dealt with, what people were going through, right?
Having empathy, putting yourself in their situation.
Yeah,
I'm about to take a couple of long haul flights, so I will. Star Is Born and Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most inspirational book. We talked about 127 hours,
yeah, 127
but maybe
hours,
another one as well.
Maybe another one in the world of running. Maybe Born to Run is a great.
You
one.
actually suggested that for me. I mean, every so but you were the first person that suggested that for me. Yeah.
Yeah. My book, Runaway Success.
Of
course, I've got to plug that. I actually have not read my book. Can you believe it? I've not read it in its completed
in its
entirety.
Yeah.
And then
a business book.
A business book. I love Getting Naked. Business fable. It's about consultancy and how you build trust. How you sell yourself. A very easy read. I recommend that. Yeah, Getting Naked.
Getting Naked.
I
Who's it by?
forget the name of the of the author now.
That sounds right up my strata. So, Getting Naked book. And favourite quotes. It's by Patrick Lencioni.
Yes, that's the one. That's the one.
Favourite quotes. You've already given a couple, actually.
Yeah,
go far, go together.
I think this one comes from my trainer and my coach, and he says we always teach what we need the most. Right? And I found that to be true in terms of my focus when I'm coaching clients, and whether they're business clients or leaders or high potentials or personal people. I've found that I've attracted those kind of people, and we've worked on those issues where I've needed the most. You know?
I really like that. I actually was having that discussion just the other day about if you want to learn something, teach it.
Yeah.
And it enables you to really, if you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it. So the best way to truly learn something is put yourself in an environment where you have to train other people how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another level of that is that if you want to know what you need to learn, go teach something. Because I find that if we were to do this podcast a year ago, 5 years ago, I would be talking about different things, right? Even though the questions are the same or the experiences is based on the same experience, I would have drawn an emphasis on focus on different things, because I find, I talk about what I need to hear the most.
Yeah, it's funny how like you evolve so much on a year to year basis, like every one of us does. Some of us don't.
Some of us don't.
And that's okay. Some of us, as long as they're happy with that.
Yeah, some of us choose not to.
Yeah, I suppose that's the point. Yeah, some of us choose not to. Favorite podcasts? Any podcast recommendations?
Actually, I'm very new to this world. Well, Endurance Asia will be my favorite one from now. But prior to this, I'm not a podcast sort of person. So
is it mainly reading? How do you consume your content?
Reading. And books.
Yeah.
I'm still not big on Kindles and the like. I would go.
I'm all about the
pages.
physical as well.
Yeah, and then I've got a pen. I'm writing. I'm circling. I'm underlining. I've got dog ears and
best kit that you've bought for under 100 US. So obviously you're doing a bit more mountaineering and stuff now, but for your running, whatever, what's the best piece of equipment or kit that you've bought for under 100 US?
Best, I don't know. Powder.
Powder. What kind of powder? Hopefully not marching powder. We're in Singapore, remember?
Yeah, well, we're in Singapore. we're in Singapore. But I remember when I was in the army, we'd have this. It's a snake brand. It's like a cooling kind of medicated powder, and it's good, to be out there, and you don't have a chance at taking a proper shower, and you just sprinkles on his body. It just cools you down, dries you out.
Is there a brand name?
I think it's a snake brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like just a dry shower almost.
Yeah, it's a dry shower almost, right? And it cools you down. I love it. Dries you off, cools you down. Sorry, that's the only thing I can think of. It's not quite a piece of kit.
No, that's fine. It could be like any nutrition stuff or...
Nutritional stuff. Ensure Life.
Ensure Life.
Oh, when I was training, which race was it for? I think could have been Atacama. I enlisted the help of a nutritionist. And because I'm not big, my body is not big on electrolytes. I've tried all forms, right? The tablets, the powders, gels, and everything else. And my stomach just reacts, to them. Either a lot of flatulence, bloatedness, stomach upsets. And then my nutritionist said, have you tried this thing called Ensure Life? I'm like, what is it? He says, well, I tend to use it with my hospital patients, right? You tend to use, and it's a meal replacement drink. I was like, huh? What good would that be?
And so it's just like got all the macros.
Absolutely, yeah. And he gave me a packet, and I held it up against a packet of electrolytes, and whatever the electrolytes had, this thing had.
Yeah, as well as the protein.
As well as the protein and everything else. I thought, oh well, okay, if it's good for a dying person, it's good for me because it feels like I'm dying out there. And it worked like a treat. I mean, I love drinking milk.
What's the brand again, sorry?
Ensure Life.
Ensure Life, yeah.
And it's, they come in, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry flavor.
Yeah.
And it's a good psychological boost as well. And it's a part meal replacement.
Yeah.
And it also replaces electrolytes. So, I'd have to. I actually use that, let's say, in a long day as one of my 11s.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a good kind of a boost. And then when I get back into the camp, at the end of the stage, that's my recovery drink.
There you go.
All right, so I love that. I recommend that.
So it's kind of like a protein shake, but then also has all of
it's a meal replacement for hospital patients. People who can't take any solids, but they can drink.
Yeah. Nice. And your proudest personal, so around trail running, endurance, and professional moments of your life.
Wow.
Whilst this is a quick fire question, I know that's a deep one.
Right, yeah.
This is actually a question I always ask when I'm like interviewing candidates to work with and stuff.
Right,
as well.
right.
It reveals a lot.
I think my proudest, I think when it comes to running, I think, first of all, having the courage to start in the first place at what people might consider an old age, to start, running my first marathon at 37, right? And then also having the courage to withdraw from the Tour de Jean. I think that would be my two proudest moments in terms of the running.
The courage to start and the courage to finish. I like
courage to say yes, courage to say no, right? And I'm proudest. I was in this business and personal development program last week in Arizona in the US, and it was one of those really, intensive week. Right, that you spend with a bunch of people. And as we neared the end, and it was a stellar group of people. I mean, these were very strong, business people, millionaires, highly accomplished in multiple areas in their life. Just an exceptional bunch of human beings. And on the penultimate day of the training, the trainer said, "Hey, look, you guys didn't know this, but we'd like you to do a peer vote." Right, and we've got 4 different categories. First is most inspiring. Second is most relentless. Third is the most, the person who's most demonstrated, I've got this, right? And the last one is most trusted. And cast your votes. And I got the most trusted, which matters a lot for me. I actually put it on my Facebook. I say why this one matters the most is, over the course of life, we accumulate a lot of certificates and medals, right? Some certificates are for attendance in something, some are for completion of a program, some are for a marks scored or some kind of a target that we had met. But this one, there's no way you can work towards it, right? Someone said, how do I make sure that I get voted most trusted? I wouldn't even know how to begin. And to get that from a stellar group of individuals and unsolicited that way, that was definitely my proudest personal and also business moment.
That's amazing. And actually it's quite fitting because you were the person that introduced me to the trusted advisor model, the David Meister book, and that's actually been really influential in my career over the last 2.5-3 years since you introduced it to me. I think that around building trust. And so it doesn't surprise me that they voted you the most trusted, Thaddeus.
Thank you.
Any closing remarks for audience? Any recommendations for people that are thinking of starting, or whether it be either a career move or setting goals for their physical endurance side?
I think one of the biggest pain in life I find is the pain of regret, and the problem with regret is that you can never go back and right it, right? And there are 4 ways in which you go through life, right? One, if we look at life as a game that we play in life, level 1 is not playing, right? Just letting life take you wherever it goes, and just showing up. Level 2 is just playing, right? Where you're just doing the bare minimum just to get by. Level 3 is playing not to lose. Right, where you're kind of giving it, but not your all, just playing it safe. And then level 4 is playing to win. The biggest regret is that you look back, and if you're not in category 4 or level 4, you cannot fix it anymore. So I think my parting shots would be don't put yourself in in the pain of regret, right? Pain of sadness, you allow yourself to go through a sadness, you get out of it, right? Pain of a bad knee, you can get it fixed and get out of it. Pain on the regret, you can't get out of it. So, go out there and play full and play to win.
Yeah, I love that, Thaddeus. One of my favourite quotes is very simple one: do it like you mean it. And if you're going to do it, like, go all in, do it properly, and do it to the best of your ability. Mate, it's always such a pleasure talking to you. Every time we catch up, I feel truly enlightened and feel that I've learnt more, become a better person in the process. So look forward to having you on again. Look forward to hearing more about your future mountaineering stories and obviously business successes. But Thaddeus, thank you so much for coming to join us. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Scott, and I love to be involved in whatever comes next, right? And in any podcast or outside of podcast, live work, relationship, business. The pleasure is all mine.
Good man. Thanks very much. Awesome. Cheers, mate.
The Endurance Asia Podcast.
And always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining cause things ain't that bad.